Thank you everyone for joining us to this Eurogas Let's Meet on emission reporting, market-based instrument, and the relation with the GHG protocol. Today we've got the pleasure to discuss about a critical topic for all companies reporting their GHG emission and aiming at the end of the day to decarbonize. Indeed, when one company is reporting its GHG emission, it has to follow certain methodologies, certain guidelines, certain standards. And to define those, one widely recognized and influential initiative is the GHG protocol. The whole purpose of the GHG protocol is to provide a consistent and transparent framework for organizations. Over the last year, the renewable gases industry got very involved into the GHG protocol discussion and to some extent to the SBTi discussion as well. Indeed, it was related to a topic closely related with what we call market-based instrument certificates. Market-based instruments, energy attribute certificates, plenty of words, but at the end of the day, it's one basket to regroup contractual tools. A good way of thinking about it, think about guarantees of origin for electricity or certificates for biofuels. Something that you can buy to make claim about the sustainability of the product that you're producing or product that you are buying. Certificates are being used by most of the industry undertaking decarbonizations. They're a major part of their decarbonization strategies, and they're de facto a major part of the business cases of most decarbonization activity projects and products. Now, the big question is, when you're having those certificates and methodology to report GHG emission, is how to factor certificates when you're reporting your GHG emission. In a recent guidance, one of the standard documents issued by the GHG protocol, presented in September 2022, one guidance, one recommendation for companies that were sourcing gas from the grid was that the use of market-based instruments, certificate, credit could not be used to adjust your Scope 1 emission, the emission of your own company. And this is when most of the renewable gases industry got very actively involved. This is only the start of the discussion. And I was mentioning that the GHG protocol is a very influential organization to set that. This is why I'm very honored to have with us today Mr. Pankaj Bhatia. He is the director of the GHG protocol, the global director of the GHG protocol, and he's from the World Resource Institute. Without further ado, Mr. Bhatia, thank you very much for joining us today. I leave you the floor.
Thank you very much, Victor, for this kind introduction. And thank you to the organizers for giving us this opportunity. I think for my short keynote remarks, I would like to begin with a broad overview of key concepts followed in the GHG protocol that are relevant here, by an outline of some key questions that we hope to address in the land sector guidance, followed by a third part of my remarks, which is to speak about some questions that we may need to address in the broader updates process. You mentioned about certificates, so the role of certificates, and as I understand, the biogas industry has demonstrated one of the best models how to do it well. And that is the part of my third component and how we will like to involve you in that process. Now, I must also apologize that this may be a bit in the technical weeds. I'm not sure whether I'm fully able to connect with the audience, but unfortunately, I'm an expert in GHG protocol and the nature of my work and the relevance of the issues at hand. I think some of my ideas could be a little technical, and my apologies for that. I hope that these ideas will be seen as food for thought and an opportunity for a dialogue to shape the revision's work we will embark in the coming months. Let me start with a quick recap of inventory accounting and project accounting concepts. Following the Kyoto Protocol in 1997, WRI and WBCSD formed a partnership to develop the current corporate standards published in 2004 and the project protocol published in 2005, all under the GHG protocol initiative. These two standards provided two methods to account for emissions and reductions. Inventory accounting guidance, which describes how to account for your emissions to the atmosphere, and project-based accounting guidance, which describes how to evaluate emissions effects related to a counterfactual baseline scenario without the action. Inventory accounting, also known as attributional accounting, tracks GHG emissions and removals within a defined inventory boundary over time. We know it has been the primary method used by corporations, countries, and other organizations to report emissions from their operations and supply chains and downstream effects, and its rules and procedures are detailed within the Greenhouse Gas Protocol standards and guidance documents, including the corporate standard, the Scope 2 guidance, the Scope 3 standard, and now also the upcoming land sector guidance. Project-based accounting, also known as consequential accounting, estimates the impacts or changes of GHG emissions from specific projects, actions, or interventions relative to a counterfactual baseline scenario. It has been the primary method used to evaluate the emission effects of projects or interventions by estimating their avoided or induced emissions impacts. Its rules and procedures were first detailed in the GHG protocol for project accounting and in other documents and working paper. Compared to inventory accounting, project-based accounting is less widely used, and there are currently no target or goal-setting programs or disclosures based on it. However, there is increasing interest in projects or intervention accounting that are perceived to have an overall benefit on the climate, and also parallel interest in having these actions included in inventories as a way to incentivize these actions. Now, with this context, I want to just also evaluate the feedback we are receiving from stakeholders in the last few months. Some messages stand out. First of all, the same confirmation I earlier spoke also, the GHG protocol is providing standards for two accounting approaches, inventory accounting and project or intervention accounting. They represent two separate but valuable types of accounting methods. Stakeholder feedback has highlighted both methods are essential for companies in driving ambition and achieving meaningful decarbonization targets. However, the current disclosure and target setting programs mainly focus or only focus on inventory accounting, that is within the scopes. Methods to account for mitigation impacts need to be clarified and recognized within target and goal setting programs. Many respondents also requested that the GHG protocol provide clarity on accounting methods applicable to both impacts within the scopes and also outside the scopes. They also request that the GHG protocol provide guidance on around the reporting of use and claims associated with project impacts and market-based instruments. Finally, respondents also want to maximize harmonization between the requirements of GHG protocol and different programs, including SBTi and regulatory programs. So this kind of sets a broader context, I think, both from a conceptual standpoint and also from a stakeholder feedback standpoint. So let me now just share a couple of points on GHG protocol's current accounting standards and the latest discussion for the land sector and removal guidance and how that applies to biogases or renewable gases. Since inception, the protocol has always required that GHG emissions from any source must always be reported. Current GHG protocol standards require all GHG emissions from any direct on-site usage of bio-based fuels to be reported separately from Scope 1. This also applies to indirect biogenic emissions as well as in Scope 2 and Scope 3. In all cases, biogenic CO2 emissions are reported separately, while biogenic CH4 and N2O emissions are reported in the relevant scope. So this is clear from the current standards. Over the past 4 years now, the GHG protocol has been developing new guidance to account for land sector emissions and CO2 removals in corporate GHG inventories, which includes new guidance on biogenic CO2 emissions from bioenergy combustion. The focus has been on clarifying how companies can account for the full life cycle impacts of bioenergy, including renewable gases. The ongoing work on land sector guidance is addressing some very important questions for the biogas sector concerning the full accounting of bioenergy impacts, such as how to account for GHG impacts on the land associated with bioenergy feedstock production, mainly what emissions to include from land use change and land management, how to separately account for potential global impacts on land use outside of companies' supply chains or leakage. We are still finalizing which approach to be used here, but are considering different options based on tracking the land occupation, indirect land use change, or carbon opportunity costs associated with lands needed to produce bioenergy feedstocks. This information we expect will be reported in a separate category outside the scopes. Then another question is where to report biogenic emissions in scope 1, 2, or 3. Then another question is how to allocate and report GHG emissions across the value chain. Our current approach is to not take a specific approach on the use of bioenergy certification, example, use of mass balance or book and claim certificates. And as I think has been communicated also earlier, we are planning to defer to the broader standards updates process to look at this question of the role of market-based accounting from a cross-sector perspective, as this question has been relevant not just in the biogas sector, but across even scope 3, scope 2 already it is. And so this is a broader question that will be addressed with broader set of standards and guidelines. In the current guidance, we also plan to provide guidance on how to account for upstream GHG impacts associated with waste bioenergy feedstocks. I should summarize by saying that the new guidance will aim to clarify that companies cannot assume that all bioenergy is carbon neutral, but must account for relevant life cycle GHG emissions, including impacts to carbon stock on the land as relevant to their value chain. The recently published interim update on accounting for biomethane certificates GHG protocol provides a historical overview of biomethane certificates under the GHG protocol, as well as an outline of the approach for a holistic examination of similar certificate-based and other accounting approaches, such as green steel, low carbon agriculture commodities, green hydrogen, etc., that are currently being proposed for GHG inventories as well as targets and goals program. As the audience here is familiar, I think, the Annex B on biomethane was withdrawn from the draft land sector and removals guidance, including the guidance that certificates cannot be used to account for gas source from a common carrier pipeline, and combustion emissions should only be reported based on grid average mix of fossil and biogenic natural gas from the common carrier pipeline. So it was largely due to your feedback and guidance. I think we made that decision. And as I said, this issue will be addressed as part of the broader work that we are planning under the GHG protocol. Now, of course, as I mentioned earlier, that we want to elevate the importance of project and mitigation impact accounting generally, and in particular concerning renewable gases. And so for that purpose, we will be also developing a full work stream and guidance on application of project mitigation impact accounting to undertake accounting of impacts within the value chain as well as outside the value chain. So we think that will be a very relevant guidance that will inform the decisions also on how to integrate market-based accounting approach in the device standards, as well as to provide an independent guidance on how to implement market-based approach, whether within the inventory standards or within the scopes or outside the scopes. So this is a work that we will be undertaking in the coming months. We will kickstart this process in the first quarter of 2024, and we will be keeping everybody up to date on the plans and the process through our newsletter and also on our website. So I think I should conclude now. Thanks again for providing this opportunity. I think it was fast and somewhat quick snapshot, perhaps a lot of technical questions here. Again, I would say that we value your contributions, guidance, and engagement as very important and meaningful in ensuring we address key questions, learning from your good practice of rigorous accounting methods and criteria used in the certificates approach that you have already applied, and to give us some guidance on how to apply a robust market-based accounting within inventories and intervention accounting outside inventories. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bhatia. Indeed, it's always a very tough exercise to give an overview of something so technical but so important, and I think you did a great job. And thank you very much for giving us the feedback that what we voiced during the process, the transparent process that you organized, was taken into account. Maybe I will jump on that with just one question about the upcoming stages for that process. You mentioned that an exercise will be carried in Q1 2024. Beyond receiving updates, and I encourage everyone in this webinar to register to your newsletter, will there be any possibility for us to provide input, for the industry to provide you with input and give you concrete example of what we are doing to feed into the process?
Yes, very much. And we would actually really like your participation in the relevant technical working groups. There are two parts of our upcoming guidance. One is the land sector and removal guidance process, which is coming to an end. And we are planning a final advisory committee meeting in January of 2024 to reach a decision on the final few remaining issues. And then we expect this guidance to be officially published by September, October of 2024. In parallel, as I said, we will start publicly. Already we have started internally within the Secretariat. We are already preparing necessary documents to kickstart this process, but publicly we will kickstart this with the launch of the governance bodies. There will be a convening of technical working groups. We will have some opportunity for stakeholders to submit their expression of interest with justification in participating in relevant technical working groups. After that, we receive expression of interest, and we will go through a process to finalize the formation of technical working groups. We think there will be likely 4 technical working groups, one on scope 1, corporate standard, one on scope 2, third one on scope 3, and fourth one on market-based accounting workstream. There will be also a cross-cutting element because market-based accounting, for example, is a cross-cutting element of other 3 working groups. And so we will identify how to map that out, how to ensure that interaction and integration. Q1 is when the process is expected to start, revisions process, and then there will be a 2-year time period for us to finalize the revisions. To complete the revisions in the current standards and to also provide new guidance on market-based accounting.
That's very clear. Thank you very much. We'll have the opportunity to continue to collaborate then. Thank you once again for this keynote speech. I know you've got coming up another meeting, so thank you for making the time for us. With that, I propose to move on to the panel. Thank you once again, Mr. Bhatia. We have a very nice panel because it's not only biogas people. You've got biogas representative, e-methane representative, methanol representative, and people consuming all of this fuel. Maybe we can start with Mr. Ryota Kuzuki, the division head of international certification and standards harmonization in the planning department of the Japan Gas Association. Mr. Kuzuki, I know you've got some slides. Maybe we can put them in full screen. Yes, that works perfectly. Thank you, Mr. Kuzuki. I'll leave the floor to you.
So, can you hear me? Thank you very much. My name is Ryota Kuzuki, division head of international, responsible for international certification and standard harmonization of the JGA. I'm very honored to have this opportunity to present briefly about the Japan Gas Association and our new challenge for the carbon neutral city gas supply in Japan. The Japan Gas Association is a non-profit organization established in 1947, consisting of about 200 companies. Our members cover about 27 million customers, or about half of the total number of households in Japan. Total volume of annual gas supply is about 40 billion cubic meters. Total pipeline length is over 260,000 kilometers. Now, Japan's city gas industry was the first mover in the world to introduce and commercialize the LNG for city gas supply in 1969. Now, there are 37 LNG receiving terminals in Japan. About 50 years have passed since the introduction of LNG. In October 2020, the Japanese government announced its goal to be becoming carbon neutrality by 2050 in April. And in April 2021, it also set a new target of reducing GHG emissions in 2030 by 46% from 2013. Japan's city gas industry is now facing a new challenge to meet the target. Now we are focusing on methanation as key technology to supply non-fossil feedstock for city gas. As you know, methanation process combines hydrogen with captured CO2 into methane, which we call e-methane. CO2 emitted from the e-methane combustion is originally come from exhausted flue gases, biomass, atmosphere, and or recycled carbon fuels. Therefore, it does not cause additional emission of CO2 to the atmosphere. And this is the final image. And now I'm talking about encouraging documents which has been issued by the intergovernmental frameworks. First one is IPCC Sixth Assessment Report Mitigating Climate Change, issued last year. It described the electricity can be used to generate hydrogen and for greater compatibility with existing gas systems and appliances. The hydrogen can be combined with captured carbon dioxide to form methane and other synthetic fuels. Another example is that the G7 Climate, Energy, and Environmental Ministers communique issued this year in the part of carbon management, utilization, carbon recycling technologies, including recycled carbon fuels such as gas, such as e-fuels and e-methane, also can reduce emissions with existing infrastructure. Now I'm talking about GHG protocol. The Japan Gas Association is very interested in the GHG protocol standards and the guidance update process that is announced to be done between 2024 and 2025. In March this year, we responded to the GHG protocol global survey, hoping that the GHG protocol update and additional standards will ensure a market-based accounting approach to Scope 1 and Scope 3 inventory that ensure transfer of environmental value attributes through certificates for such e-methane and other means. It would accelerate, we believe, that recycled carbon fuels such as e-methane as well as biomethane. So learning about GHG protocol update process is very important for our next action. Finally, I'm showing the JGA's current preparing for scheme, the certification scheme. Certify environmental attributes of biomethane and e-methane. Currently, this is in the middle of the pilot test in Japan. And internationally accepted and harmonized methodologies are essential to ensure the environmental attributes accounting and transfer it, which would contribute to more introduction of recycled carbon fuels such as e-methane and of course biomethane. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Ryota, for this presentation. Thank you for giving that angle about e-methane that will be also critical. Before we move on to questions, because I do have questions for you,
yes.
I would like to welcome the next panelist, giving you another angle, Mrs. Karlijn Arts from OCI. She is the Global Head of Sustainability and Regulatory Affairs. Hi, Karlijn.
Hi everyone. Well, thank you. Good to be here. Before we start, I of course like to thank Eurogas for organizing this important session, and great that you got hold of WRI, of course, to present their lessons learned up till now. If all is correct, Kathleen, you have my slides, so I would ask you to put them on. There you go. Maybe if you could already go to the next slide. We're almost there, I guess. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Karlijn. I'm the Global Head of Sustainability and Regulatory Affairs at the methanol group of OCI. OCI is a chemical company. And you see a great overview over here on this slide. Even though this is all really interesting, what we actually do is that we produce both ammonia as methanol. And please, if you can continue to the next slide. For the people who are not that familiar in the chemical company and what we can do with all those molecules, this is kind of a nice overview. So as we produce both ammonia and methanol, you can see them as the building blocks of modern society. So all these molecules can be used in different types of products. So for example, on the ammonia side, currently ammonia is often being used for fertilizer production. And in the future, of course, ammonia can be used as a hydrogen carrier or as also as a biofuel. And OCI is the world's third biggest producer of ammonia. And maybe if you can go to the next slide. And we also produce methanol, as I said before. So methanol can be used as a building block for the production of your laminate floors. It's in your car, it's in your clothes. And OCI is world's fifth biggest producer of methanol, but it's the biggest producer of biomethanol. What can you do with biomethanol? So we're already producing it. Next year, we're aiming to produce 200,000 tons of biomethanol, and we want to ramp up every year. You can already start using our biomethanol to fuel your ship, to drive your car, of course, but also as a building block for medicines, or even to feed microbes, which can produce protein from digesting our biomethanol. So there is a number of options where our biomethanol can be used for. And that's why it's so important, both on the methanol side and the ammonia side, because it's such a building block, that this building block is already being decarbonized or fossil decarbonized, because the emission and emission reduction will travel throughout the entire supply chain. Maybe thank you. So this is a great slide, or at least for me, it's a great slide. Working on a lot of sustainable development within the company. So what you see over here is where we operate. So as you can see, we're a global player operating in many different continents, and both on the ammonia side and the methanol side, working to accelerate our sustainability.
Karlijn, just sorry to interrupt you. I think your microphone is not picking up all the sound. So if you can speak up just a bit. Yeah, sure. We lost you for a bit. Sorry.
Sure. Where did you lose me?
Just at the start of that slide.
Ah, good. Okay. No, sure. Was just explaining that this is for me a great slide, and especially the green box that you see in this slide. So in this slide, you see an overview of the sustainable projects which we are conducting both on the ammonia and on the methanol side, that were positioned globally, so on a lot of continents. So we have a big reach, but also a big challenge, as you can see at the volumes that we're currently producing. And Kathleen, could you go to the next slide? Yeah, and this is the interesting slide as well. So this is more focused on the methanol side. Of course, all these different colors can also be there for the ammonia side. So what this slide actually does, it's a breakdown of different pathways, both the technologies and the feedstock that we use per pathways, and also the type of methanol which would then result in. So right now, OCI is using the steam methane reformer technology to produce methanol in the end. And as a feedstock, we use gas. So currently, the only way to produce biomethanol at scale is to replace natural gas by biogas, biomethane to be more precise. As you need a lot of small biogas sources to produce a rather big number of biomethanol, you do not want to liquefy and truck all these different batches at different locations to your facility. So ideally, you want to make use of the highly efficient gas grids, which are in many countries already in place. So what we do is we make use of that gas grid by indeed injecting biogas into the gas grid. And then we, of course, certify our entire supply chain via sustainability certification scheme, through which our administration is also annually being audited. And then we allocate the environmental benefits of that biogas, that biomethane injection via the mass balance approach to our facility. And thanks to this demand, our biogas demand, the fossil gas on the gas grid is actually being replaced. So what we're currently doing, if you look at this slide, is actually the pathway all the way up. So biogas into SMR, and then syngas production up to biomethanol. In the future, when technologies such as the gasification technology is available on a commercial scale, or when electrolyzers are up and running, we will, of course, integrate these technologies to produce our bio and Power-to-X products. But as we already want to make a contribution to fossil decarbonizing our supply chain, we want to act right now. And the only way to act right now is through market-based instruments, like the biomethane certificate system. So yes, we want to become a front running. And of course, we want to show the chemical industry, which is falling behind a bit on sustainability efforts, that we can already start making impact now. But we really need these market-based accounting instruments, the biomethane certificates, the mass balance approach, to already make impact now. It would be unfortunate if we need to wait for gasification to come online on commercial scale, for example, or the electrolyzers, which will only be in 2028 before we can start taking action. So also with our supply chain, and we're kind of the living proof that market-based accounting instruments are needed. And thanks to that we can already start producing renewable molecules right now. So that definitely ties in with the activities of Greenhouse Gas Protocol. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, great slide, give you a good idea that I think everybody can benefit from. Just a reminder before we move on, and I use your nice segue about biomethane, do not hesitate to use the Q&A function to type question for our panelists. You can find it in the menu of Zoom. And as I've said, I'm going to use the biomethane angle there because our next speaker is is very well placed to talk about biomethane. Nick Crowe, Government Affairs and Development Director at Grissan Renewable Energy, one of the major players, if not, you're the biggest, I think, in the UK, Nick, right? I leave you the floor.
Wonderful. Well, thanks, Victor. And thank you to the panelists. Both of those talks were incredibly interesting so far. I'd also thank Pankaj for his agreeing to speak today. Given the impact and far-reaching nature of the changes to the protocol proposed last year, it's right that there is accountability for those changes. Some really interesting commentary. I've just scribbled down a couple of notes as Pankaj was speaking, firstly around engagement, and I think we'll touch on that a little bit later in this talk, but also around changes to indirect land use and some clear opportunities there for particularly waste or RED 3 eligible sources of biomethane to find an opening in finding an agreement with the protocol that hopefully satisfies both parties. So some positive comments, work still to be done, but we'll see where we get to. So as Victor rightly said, I represent Grissan Renewable Energy. We're the largest producer of biomethane in the UK and one of the largest generators in the world. Currently, we work exclusively in Scotland, where we pride ourselves on sites that maximise environmental benefits and fit into the beautiful natural landscape of the Scottish countryside. From the start of next year, we'll be generating in excess of 1 terawatt-hour of green gas per year. That's enough gas to heat about 1 million homes on UK average gas use. To put that into context, Grissan's biomethane alone heats 3 times as many homes as the total number of heat pumps currently installed across the whole of the UK. As a company, we're fundamentally committed to decarbonisation on the whole, but particularly of the UK's gas grid, and have significant plans for expansion over the coming years. So, with government support now firmly behind the benefits of green gas, both in the UK and abroad, it was challenging to see last year the WRI's position on biomethane, and unfortunately the impact it also had on our industry. We have on several occasions made clear to Pankaj and his team that their actions last year caused significant damage to investor confidence, and their future approach to what we're calling market-based measures has the potential to deal significant and lasting damage as well. So we have to try and get this right. If the attendees will indulge me, for the purposes of understanding why that was damaging, I'd like to explain in a little detail how a biomethane plant actually gets built. In the future, our plants will produce 3 products: biogenic CO2, a low-carbon fertilizer replacement, and renewable gas, both as a molecule and its associated greenness when compared to natural gas. Today, though, CO2 markets are still awakening, and until storage becomes a viable option, this line item is linked to a limited and volatile usage market. Likewise, policies are such in the UK, and indeed across wider Europe, that farmers are not really incentivised to take our digester as a replacement for their heavy carbon artificial fertilisers. I don't doubt this will change in the future, but it's common currently for those managing this co-product, in most cases the biomethane generator, to lead this as a cost to the producer. The gas price, as hopefully attendees on this call of all calls will know, is not dictated by our fleet of anaerobic digesters across the Scottish countryside. But where we can demand some additional value is in the greenness of our gas and the power of letting a consumer potentially decarbonise. The strength of this market, the certificates that underwrite that, had been consistently growing over the previous 4 to 5 years until last year's draft guidance was announced. Being able to bank this value from corporates seeking to decarbonise resulted in longer-term gas purchase agreements based around these guarantees of origin, which brought marginal plants into a more positive position from an investment perspective. Furthermore, in its modelling for the Green Gas Support Scheme, the UK government's tariff of choice for biomethane, the tariff is calculated with fed through expected profitability from RGGOs to reduce their tariff. I can say that with some certainty because I did some of that modelling myself, and that was designed to clearly evidence the additionality that certificates do provide to a biomethane generator. For clarity's sake, let me be clear. The ability to wrap an RGGO into a gas purchase deal directly has resulted in more plants being built both at home and abroad. And while the WRI are less concerned by the fact that their actions make building a plant harder, and they are more concerned with decarbonisation, we realise, I'm afraid I'm still yet to hear a persuasive argument from them on why they felt comfortable directly intervening in this marketplace in the manner they did last year. Indeed, we're now a year on, and despite our questions, I'm afraid we're still none the wiser. Is it because, as Pankaj described in his speech earlier, moving between accounting approaches is challenging for a technology that moves via a gas grid? If so, then that is understandable, but please work with the industry to find a methodology that works rather than jumping to damaging conclusions with limited consultation. Or is it because of an institutional wariness of renewable gas technologies more generally? This hasn't been ruled out, but it is absolutely not the role of an organisation such as the WRI, with limited democratic accountability, I might add, to be dictating the rules of competition in such a way. As we look forward, there is also then a genuine question around what indeed constitutes the market-based commodity that has caused so much difficulty. There are, of course, reasonable concerns about carbon accounting and baseless carbon removal schemes, and the assumed generations associated with certain forms of green power. But gas has always been moved as a physical commodity. To challenge the ability to sell biomethane via a gas grid is effectively challenging the whole system of gas trading that gets energies to today's users. We shouldn't be trying to rewrite the rule book on this. What is more, the future of decarbonisation in Europe is through certification-based schemes which utilise existing gas assets, whether it be for biomethane, e-methane, or blended hydrogen. The Dutch, French, and Irish governments are all currently looking at obligation schemes that will require the trading of gas, and the EU ETS is already accepting RGGOs. We hope the UK government will follow suit on both counts. Of course, there is always more that can be done to reduce fraud and error and ensure that strict sustainability criteria are maintained. Pankaj did touch on that in his speech, and it was good to hear. But that's why I'm grateful to be working with Eurogas, the European Biogas Association, the World Biogas Association, the American Coalition for Renewable Natural Gas, ERGA and EFET, to now develop a best practice framework for biomethane transactions that we can use globally. We hope to be able to say more on this in the new year. I believe a political statement by those in the value chain will be published in the not too distant future in order to address the discrepancies in the confirmed changes to the land use guidance, i.e. the removal of Annex B on biomethane certificates and the position of SBTI on the same manner currently. I look forward to the WRI and SBTI engaging proactively in this process before publication of draft guidance next year on market-based measures, so that we can continue to meet important, stretching national and supranational targets for green gas that will ultimately help all of our consumers decarbonise with limited cost impacts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you for providing your view on this important question, and that for sure will be forwarded to the GHG protocol. Before we move on to the Q&A, last panelist of today, I have the pleasure to welcome Cédric Jourdain, Project Officer, Sustainability Expert at CMA CGM. Cédric, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Victor. Hello, everyone. So first of all, I want to thank GHG protocol and Mr. Bhatia for its presentation. And I want also to thank Eurogas Association for the invitation and also the panelists for their presentations. I'm very pleased to be with you today and to present CMA views on these topics. So first, a few words on CMA. CMA CGM is a global maritime transport leader, but not only, we have also activities on logistics. So we want to integrate the full value chain of the transport, so to be so from the maritime transport up to the final delivery to the customers. And we are deeply committed to sustainability and to decarbonization because we have a higher mission. We want to be net zero by 2050. And that's a challenging commitment because when we know that in 2022, we emitted 40 million tons of CO2, of GHG emission, that's quite a lot. That's the equivalent of the emission of Switzerland. So it's really challenging. We have a lot of to do, a lot of work to be done in order to reduce our emissions. And that's really important that we can measure these emissions and that we can rely on international standard and a reference which is well known worldwide and used by the industry, which is provided by the GHG protocol, because we can measure it. We can measure our emissions with accuracy, and we can report them in order to better know where we have to do efforts, where we need to reduce our emissions. So that's a really good analysis, and the GHG protocol is a transparent and consistent framework. So we really need to rely on this reference. So to reduce our emissions, we need to decarbonize with 3 levers. So the first one is to modernize our assets. So to order a new fleet. So we have ordered a LNG fleet. We have ordered new methanol vessels in order to be more efficient and to allow to new molecules. The second lever is the operation efficiency. So on a daily basis to reduce our consumption of fuel in order to be sure that we will reduce our emissions. And the final one, but which will play a major role, is the alternatives fuels, so the new energies. So CMA, as I said, has ordered already LNG fleet and methanol fleet. So it will be the consumption of biomethane, but also e-fuels and e-methane and e-methanol. And so to reduce our emissions, we really need these low emission fuels or even zero emissions fuels. And to do so, we need to access to significant volumes of these sustainable energies worldwide, because we will source it from to Miami, in Marseille, but also in Singapore. We need the energies will be available everywhere on the earth, because we have international maritime activities, and these energies should be at competitive prices in order to be sure that we'll actually be competitive to our competitors. And it's essential to develop and to scale up the production of these new alternative fuels, so biofuels and e-fuels, because if we know that we'll be in competition with other sectors like aviation, so a lot of people are going to search for the same molecules. So we really need to unlock the production of these new fuels. We need to work with energy suppliers like OCI and Grissan in order to collaborate and develop the infrastructures, develop these new molecules to make it possible. And in order to do so, to develop these new molecules, we need flexibility, because by enabling market-based instruments like book and claim certificates and at least a mass balance system, we will unlock the production, and this market-based instrument will come with rigorous traceability and audit processes in order to be sure that we will avoid any double accounting, and yes, we really need these new region energies with flexibility in order to be sure that the volumes will be sufficient, will be significant, and will be also sustainable. So I will finish with yes, the three words. So flexibility, to have the most volume possible. Confidence also into the system, so with rigorous traceability. And the last one will be also visibility with the international standards, GHG protocol, but also EU and IMO regulations, in order to be sure that we'll be able to consume these new energies and new molecules with flexibility and with market-based instruments. So thanks a lot, and eager to go to the questions.
Thank you very much, Cédric. Thank you for providing this view. Indeed, your company will consume most of the fuel we just talked about. I will invite all speakers to join us and open the camera. I've got one question, maybe to start the discussion. One very generic question, but I think that's good for the audience because we know it's not only experts joining us today. I've heard throughout your presentations the importance of the GHG protocol in your business, the importance it has for your customers. We've seen over the summer that the GHG protocol made some decision. Nick, I think you already mentioned that a bit, but I'd be interested to hear from you if the GHG protocol is getting it wrong, if they're making certain decisions, like the one we've seen over the summer. What is the concrete risk? What is the impact concretely for you of having a GHG protocol that do not align with your business and your practice? I don't know who wants to start. I see, Nick, that you open your mic directly. Please.
Yeah. Fundamentally, less plants get built. And not only that, it costs governments more to bridge the gap between the price of producing biomethane and the price of natural gas. We're in a nice situation at the moment from a producing biomethane perspective, where the price of natural gas is relatively high compared to where it has been historically, which helps to bridge that gap. But at the same time, we can't expect that to be a historical constant. In terms of what the greenhouse gas protocol is getting wrong, what they're getting right, no, I don't think anyone on this call is suggesting that their changes are coming from a bad place. They're not. It's not a deliberate attempt to kowtow an industry and make life difficult. Fundamentally, it's a lack of understanding about the way that quite a complex technology works. And they're going to need to get their head around it because it's the future of e-methane, as Mr. Kuzuki said, but also it's the future of hydrogen and blended hydrogen in the grid. That is going to move alongside natural gas. So we have to find a framework that works. And obviously the work that my organisation is doing in partnership with your own is going to be important to that. But we've got to find potentially a new framework. And I think retrospectively applying ways of working for power, for example, or carbon removals to the biomethane framework is not a long-term fix. It may end up being the development of a separate framework for renewable gases that accounts for things a certain way. So it was helpful to hear Mr. Bhatia talking about things like indirect land use and full life cycle assessments, because that is the way that policy is going. So a lot of work to be done, but hopefully a few steps in the right direction.
Thank you, Nick. You've made an opening about e-methane. I would like to ask the very same question to you, Ryota. The GHG protocol, is it playing a big role at the moment in Japan? Is it something important for what you want to do regarding e-methane?
Thank you very much for your question. In Japan, GHG protocol is widely used, mainly by industrial and commercial sectors. And our member gas companies are supporting their customers how they can reduce Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. And of course, JGA, therefore, JGA and our member companies are very interested in the GHG protocol update process in the coming 2 years, especially hoping proper enhancement of market-based instruments for Scope 1 and Scope 3 inventory accounting. It is one of our key interests. That is all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryota. Karlijn, you mentioned in your presentation that market-based instruments were already part of your business, and that's a message that we're hearing not only from OCI, but from most companies invested in the business, that market-based instrument is quite important. So my question for you, Karlijn, by how much is it important? Can you quantify a bit? Is it something significant? A huge part of your business is relying on that. So if we don't get it right, most of it would crumble. Or is it just something on the fringe that you're doing?
Oh, sure. I can be really clear on that one. We wouldn't be able to produce biomethanol, hundreds of thousands of tons, if it wasn't for market-based accounting instruments. Everything we produce right now, all our biomethanol is depending on biomethane certificates to be able to allocate the environmental benefits to the production facility. We cannot, there's currently no other way of producing biomethanol than by using these instruments. Then we need to wait up until 2028, 2030. If gasification comes online on a commercial scale, maybe that's then the way out or another way to produce biomethanol. And if indeed this would be blocked, then we would, kind of be paralyzed for the upcoming, 6-8 years. Instead of taking climate action right now, we wouldn't be able to do so. So I think it's actually damaging and quite harmful for the planet, quite literally, not only for our business, but for the planet, if we cannot use these instruments. Definitely would be enormous harmful for the industry and for the planet altogether if we cannot use these accounting instruments, definitely.
Thank you. That's very clear. And maybe to give the complementing perspective to that, because we're all talking as producers, and that's why we've got SEMA as a consumer. Cédric, you made a nice parallel with the amount of emission you need to reduce. Concretely, we're missing those fuel because market-based not coming online because multiple reasons. concretely beyond CMS, CGM not being able to decarbonize, what do you see for the shipping and the logistic industry?
Yes, thanks. So first of all, actually, market-based instruments are really important for us because just for example, all the biomethane that we have purchased at CMA were from guarantee of origin right now. So more than 60,000 tons of biomethane were purchased through guarantee of origins. So that means that we really want to support and to invest into this sector to work with energy suppliers, but we need that this biomethane, for example, certificate would be recognized by the international standards, so like by GHG protocol, but also by regulations, so EU and IMO, and that's really important to develop the sector and to be sure that we would be able to invest into this molecule because we need visibility. We are not going to buy new fuels on spot. We need to build contract with energy suppliers, so long-term offtake of 10 years or even up to 15 years. So we really need that the flexibility that we require would be recognized and the confidence into this system. So that's really important to be sure that yes, the certificates and the booking claim or mass balance system will be recognized in the future.
Thank you, Cédric. Once again, quite clear. We can draw a parallel with all fuels in general. It's not limited to biomethane, biomethanol, and e-methane. It's any kind of new technology need that long-term certainty. I would like to have one question for you, Ryota, because in your presentation, you mentioned that the Japan Gas Association is working on a gas certificate. I know people are quite interested by e-methane in general and by working with Japan, at least from that EU perspective. Do you mind explaining a bit to the audience what is your plan with that certificate? Which gases are going to be in that? When will it start?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Yes, we are now developing a gas certificate ourselves, and we are now expecting that it will start early in fiscal year 2024, so that next year. And in the first step, the gases with biomethane and e-methane produced domestically in Japan. And the next step is to enhance the scope of the gas to include internationally traded biomethane and e-methane, which will be available in the future. We are also learning now about Eurogas, which we know supports cross-border available biomethane certificate in Europe. So that we are now going to progress. Is that okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ryota. I'm happy to confirm that people from Eurogas are listening this webinar. Maybe one question for Nick, something coming from the audience about RGGOs. How significant has the impact been on pricing of RGGOs? Historically, the prices are still very high.
Yeah, so I spotted that question a second ago, Victor, and you might just see me scribbling away there. So there's two things that are linked to that. Firstly, I would challenge that even at today's higher prices, which are historically high, rightly, that's still a pretty good value for money product because, say the market average is roughly 30 euros at the moment. It goes up and down depending on who you talk to, but let's assume 30 euros. You're talking about effectively 0.2 of a ton of carbon equivalent saving, and then a 10 euro cost of going green. So that's 20 euros for your carbon plus a 10 euro cost of going green. Compared to other measures, that's actually relatively inexpensive, particularly when you look at things like voluntary carbon markets. So I would not suggest that those certificates are currently driving the value that maybe they could be. And certainly they were on a track to reach higher values had we not have had the situation we had last year. Now, I don't know, obviously that's an anonymous user, so I can't address the point directly, but ultimately we have to create a business case for a plan. And that means putting in an assumed value for those tickets. And yes, prices are currently quite high, but prices have also, within the last 5 years, been very, very low. And I'm having to forecast that with knowing that the SBTI are being difficult, knowing that the greenhouse gas protocol are opining on something that we don't think they completely understand, and that's damaging value. We have the ongoing kind of fun at the moment with the union database. I'm not taking an optimistic outlook. So yes, we might get some upside, and that's great if we can recognize it, but we're not putting the 20-25 million pounds associated with building one of these plants on the line at the peak value of a ticket, because that is just not realistically what you will receive. If you do, then great, but you've got to be realistic and rightfully conservative as well.
Thank you, Nick, for answering. You've got a follow-up question, and while you prepare, I've got a question for Cédric and Karlijn, because you can bring that angle when it comes to the question asked by Julien Mintz from Engie. The whole EU gases regulation, and I would extend that to the whole renewables regulation in Europe, is based on market base. We're seeing that quite a lot, be it in the Renewable Energy Directive or the upcoming gas package. What is your feeling about one of the questions that we've heard also made by Nick? Why is it possible that the GHG protocol and the SBTI, it's another angle to tackle there, are attacking that? Nick is mentioning maybe the lack of understanding from them. Do you think it's something about educating those bodies, or is it something else? I don't know who wants to start. Karlijn, maybe?
Yeah, sure. So looking at Cédric, whether I can kick off, but do compliment me if you want to. So what we notice is that, of course, so speaking then about the methanol molecule, it can be used, of course, as a fuel, but also for other means. But let's focus as methanol as a fuel. What I realized is that typically when you would produce a biofuel, it's made from a solid feedstock. So it's directly made from residue from agriculture or forestry residues, etc. You mentioned. So a solid feedstock. Policymakers, when writing policies, never think of biofuels which are produced from a gas as a feedstock. And already if you look at, for example, the proof of sustainability, and then they ask, for example, the raw material, and then I, for example, fill in a landfill, or I fill in a starch slurry or anything, any residue. The policymakers then think that we right away use that starch slurry or use that landfill, the MSW, municipal solid waste, to produce our fuel. Every time I need to educate them that no, it's a landfill, then methane is being created, we capture the biomethane, and then we inject it to the gas grid, and that's actually our feedstock. So I see a lot of challenges coming up, not only biomethane on the gas grid, and I fully acknowledge that's strange with some of the initiatives in Europe that internationally is not being recognized. But I even see also within Europe, also within certain member states, that people do not understand that biomethane can be a really powerful feedstock for producing fuels such as methanol. And hence also regulation is not written to include this into the, for example, the mass balance approach on the gas grid is hence not accepted. They never thought about it. This is the first time they think about it. Then they get scared, and then they prefer to say no before they can make any mistakes. So I do see that rational. So coming back to you, Victor, yeah, education is key. Also explaining, hey, you can produce biofuels from solid feedstocks and from gas. If it's gas, then you perform mass balance on the gas grid, not on the refinery level. We don't even have a refinery. So there are so many differences where we need to educate them on that they don't right now really understand how you can mass balance on the gas grid for a feedstock. And I do notice that, yeah, that's then also missing in regulation right now. So yeah, fully agree.
Thank you very much, Cédric. Maybe another angle on that question?
Yes, actually, I fully agree with Karlijn. Maybe it's a lack of knowledge of the policymakers and also from GHG protocol, because it's maybe simpler to focus on the physical product, on the physical segregation, because yes, you can see the global picture. You can you are more aware of the issues of the biofuels production, for example, so liquid biofuel, than with gaseous fuels. And maybe a good point with EU regulation that RED II recognize the mass balance system. So that's a good point in comparison with GHG protocol, where it's only on physical segregation right now. But for EU regulation, what about the non-EU production? So will the mass balance in US or in the United Kingdom or in China will be recognized to consume fuels in Europe? That's a big question. And we really need to go further into the regulations and certification of the products to answer to these questions. And yes, I would say, yeah, to go further, develop the different schemes, certification schemes, in order to be sure that we'll be able to consume American biomethane or Chinese biomethane, so to reduce the emissions and to reach our targets.
Thank you very much, Cédric. And you open for a question to Ryota, because we're talking about Europe importing. In Europe, we've got a big focus on market base, as it was questioned. Can you maybe explain, in Japan, market base, is it part of your regulatory framework? Is it something that you're already doing? Is it like the EU? Is it something completely new and you're not really in that discussion yet?
Yes, thank you very much for your question. I think market-based approach is, I don't think it is regular in the regulatory framework. It depends on, we are only focusing on the GHG protocol, and scope 2 guidance is a good reference to consider about scope 1 inventory accounting. I hope that the GHG protocol would be a leadership of the introducing the market-based approach, which will influence maybe the regulatory frameworks too. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. You make a great point. GHG protocol is a standard. It's a private body, but at the end of the day, what the GHG protocol is saying usually contaminates, if we can use that word, the regulatory framework. It's not only a private initiative, it's bigger than that. Maybe one last question so that you can wrap it up, Nick, because you've got the follow-up question about GGO price. In Europe, do they currently reflect carbon intensity of fuel? And why is there a difference between crop and waste?
So if you indulge me, Victor, I'm just going to quickly say on the point you just raised, what's interesting, you are absolutely right that typically policy follows what the greenhouse gas protocol is saying, but that's not the case currently. So we're looking at certificated schemes in 3 or 4 major European territories. So I think there's actually a big opportunity with the kind of change in the land use guidance and the upcoming market-based methods guidance for the WRI to reflect on the reasons why they're out of lockstep with national and supranational governments on this, because actually they have delineated quite significantly, and they need to get across that gap. On RGGO prices, thank you for sending me so many questions about RGGO prices. I'm not an expert on markets, so please don't take anything on my advice. The answer is kind of slightly yes and no. It depends which scheme you are generating your RGGOs through and through which they're being claimed. So the Green Gas Support Scheme in the UK generates an RGGO through the Green Gas Certification Scheme. The former of those is a government body, the latter is not, that has an assumed GHG emission factor based on RED 3 and the emissions factors of the government scheme that it follows in behind. There are some schemes, I believe, in Germany and possibly in Denmark too, that do account based on whether it's crop or waste that goes into the plant, or on the basis of that emissions factor. Typically, waste-based biomethane has far better carbon numbers, particularly if it comes from things like farm residues or food waste. So that demands a higher price in systems where you're looking to bring down overall GHG intensity, for example. I think I'd go back to my initial point on RGGOs around the cost of carbon plus the cost of going green. Typically, for those consumers concerned with the cost of going green, and Karlijn may be one of those people who is more interested in buying waste-based certificates because they carry a greater green weight, for want of a better word, than a crop-based certificate. Doesn't mean there isn't a future for energy crops in biomethane. I think certainly in terms of cover cropping and the like, that's got a big role to play in energy generation of the system. But ultimately, from a waste management perspective, that is where you get the greatest methane boon, and hence those certificates command a greater price.
Thank you very much, Nick. As you know, I would like to talk about that for an entire day, but at some point we've got to close. I would like to thank you for your participation. Thank you very much for your insight. I encourage anybody interested by this question to contact me or the panelists. They would be delighted to discuss about it. We mentioned it before, Eurogas is launching a big initiative when it comes to the GHG protocol and the SBTI to support market-based instruments. If you are in the audience, it's very likely that I'm going to contact you to join us. And Eurogas is organizing multiple events. We've got coming up the Grid Tech event on gas infrastructure planning. It's organized jointly with GIE, with technical support from Ensogy. It will be 14th of November, so next week in Brussels. And on 28th of November, we've got the annual regional conference organized by Eurogas in Lisbon. If you're interested, consult our website. We'd be happy to have you with us. Thank you all. Thank you all for joining us, and I would be very happy to continue to talk about that. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you very
Victor.
much.